A 17-year-old girl, a simple hoodie, a business-class ticket, a senior flight attendant, a face full of rage, a shout that echoes through the cabin. What starts as a power trip over a carry-on bag quickly spirals into an international incident. But this flight attendant, blinded by her own prejudice, picked the wrong passenger to bully. She thought she was shouting at a child. She had no idea she was shouting at the one person who could bring the entire airline to its knees. She makes one call, and by the time they land, well, they don't. The relentless, manufactured chill of Chicago O'Hare's Terminal 2 did little to cool the nerves of Maya Johnson. At 17, she was already a veteran of solo travel, but this trip was different. This wasn't a holiday visit to an aunt. This was the culmination of 800 hours of coding, soldering, and obsessive debugging. Tucked inside her reinforced, regulation-sized carry-on was Helios, her prototype solar-powered atmospheric water harvester. It was her ticket to the Caltech Innovators Summit in Los Angeles, an invitation-only program for the top young minds in the country. Maya pulled the strings of her Stanford hoodie tighter. The hoodie, a gift from her father after a campus tour, was her armor. It was soft, anonymous, and, as she was often reminded, deceptively casual. It was the kind of garment that made people in the first-class lounge, where she was currently sitting, courtesy of her father's meticulously managed frequent flyer miles, look at her twice. First, with the glance of, "Is she lost?" followed by the corrected, "Oh, she must be with someone." She was, as always, with no one but herself. Her phone buzzed. A text from her dad, Marcus, on the ground at Dulles. "You boarding soon? Remember, no noise-cancelling headphones during taxi or takeoff. Call me when you land." Maya smiled. "I know, Dad. Boarding in 20. Love you." He was Marcus Johnson, a man whose name carried the weight of a granite statue in Washington, D.C.'s legal circles. To Maya, he was just Dad, the man who had taught her to be precise, to be prepared, and to never, ever let anyone define her space. The digital gate sign for Trans-American Airlines, Flight 415 to LAX, finally switched to "Now boarding." Maya shouldered her backpack, gripped the handle of her precious carry-on, and joined the Priority 1 line. At the jet bridge entrance stood the gate agent, a flustered-looking man named Mark, and the senior flight attendant. This woman was the gatekeeper. She was a woman of a certain age, with hair pulled into a blonde bun so tight it seemed to be stretching her face into a permanent mask of disapproval. Her name tag, affixed to the stiff, navy blue TAA uniform, read Barbara Albright. Barbara was scanning the line, her eyes flicking over passengers with the detached scrutiny of a cattle judge. She smiled, a thin, rehearsed crack in the mask, for the businessman in the tailored suit. She offered a nod to the woman with the designer handbag. When her eyes landed on Maya, the smile didn't just fade, it inverted into a faint, but perceptible, sneer. Maya felt the familiar, cold prickle. It was the look. "Are you sure you're in the right place?" Look. She ignored it, her face a mask of polite neutrality, and held out her phone with the boarding pass displayed. Barbara scanned it. The machine beeped. Business class, seat 1B. Barbara's eyes snapped from the phone screen to Maya's face, then down to the Stanford hoodie and the slightly scuffed sneakers. The judgment was silent, but deafening. 1B, Barbara said, her voice a flat, nasal monotone. She gestured to the jet bridge. "Mind your step." Maya murmured a "thank you," and walked past, the back of her neck burning from the woman's stare. The jet bridge was a tunnel of stale air and industrial carpet. She stepped onto the aircraft, a Boeing 757, and was greeted by another flight attendant, a younger man who smiled warmly. "Welcome aboard. 1B is to your left." "Thanks," Maya said, relieved. She found her seat, a spacious pod by the window. She sighed, slipping into the plush leather. Almost there. She took her backpack off and carefully maneuvered her primary carry-on, the case containing Helios, toward the overhead bin. It was built to the exact maximum dimensions allowed by the FAA and TAA. It was designed to fit. She was just lifting it when a sharp voice cut through the cabin's boarding music. "That will not fit." Maya turned. Barbara Albright had followed her onto the plane. She wasn't helping other passengers. She was standing in the aisle, arms crossed, staring at Maya and her bag. "Oh, it's designed to fit," Maya said politely, shifting her grip. "It's regulation size, just a bit of a tight squeeze." "I said," Barbara repeated, taking a step closer, her voice dropping to a low, challenging growl. "It will not fit. You'll need to check it." "I can't check it," Maya said, her pulse quickening. The casual, dismissive authority was suffocating. It's a very delicate project. It's fragile. But I promise you, it's made to fit this specific bin." Barbara let out a sound that was half scoff, half laugh. "Honey, I have been working on this aircraft for 25 years. I know what fits, and that thing does not." She reached out and, before Maya could react, shoved the bag. Not to help, but to test it. The case banged hard against the plastic lip of the bin. Maya winced, a small, involuntary sound escaping her lips. "See?" Barbara said, her voice rising, triumphant. "It does not fit." "Please," Maya said, her voice shaking now, not with fear, but with a sudden, hot surge of anger. "Please don't touch my bag. It's very expensive, and you don't need to shove it." The cabin, which had been a low hum of activity, was beginning to quiet. The passengers already seated in business class were watching. A man in seat 2D, Mr. Henderson, lowered his Wall Street Journal. Barbara's face, which had been merely disdainful, contorted. The idea of being corrected by this teenager in a hoodie was an indignity she clearly could not tolerate. "You are not going to come onto my aircraft," Barbara hissed, jabbing a manicured finger toward Maya, "and tell me how to do my job. We don't have time for your little games. Now, you have 2 choices. You can give me the bag to be gate-checked, or you can find another flight. What is it going to be?" "It's not a game," Maya whispered, desperate. "It's my prototype. It's worth... Please, I just need to lift it properly." "A prototype?" Barbara laughed, a high, piercing sound that was anything but amused. "A prototype of what? A new way to waste everyone's time?" She grabbed the handle of the carry-on again, this time with force, and yanked it. "No!" Maya shouted, lunging forward to stop her. The shout, "No!" seemed to break a seal in Barbara. She saw it as defiance. She saw it as a challenge to her absolute authority. Her face flushed a deep, blotchy red. "How dare you!" Barbara Albright shrieked. The word wasn't just spoken, it was expelled. It was a physical force that silenced the entire front cabin. "You will not raise your voice to me, young lady." Passengers in economy, still boarding, turned their heads. The music stopped. I don't want you to break it," Maya said. Tears of frustration, not sadness, welling in her eyes. "You should have thought of that before you brought this junk on board," Barbara shouted, her voice now a full-throated yell that could be heard from the cockpit to the rear galley. "People like you always think the rules don't apply. You come in here with your cheap hoodies and your entitled attitudes, expecting the world to bend for you. Well, not on my flight. Now give me the bag." She gave the bag one final, violent to the point of breaking it yank. A sickening crack of internal electronics and fractured acrylic echoed in the sudden, dead silence. Maya Johnson froze. The tears vanished. The shaking stopped. Her face, which had been a canvas of youthful anxiety, became perfectly, terrifyingly still. She looked at the damaged bag. She looked at the other passengers, their faces a mix of shock, pity, and discomfort. She looked at Mr. Henderson, who was now standing. "Ma'am, that is entirely enough," he said. "This is a crew matter, sir. Sit down," Barbara snapped at him, her chest heaving. Maya slowly, deliberately, reached into the pocket of her hoodie. She pulled out her smartphone. Barbara sneered. "What are you going to do?" "Call your mummy. We are closing the doors. Phones must be in airplane mode. Hand me your bag and your phone, or I will have you removed for non-compliance." Maya unlocked the phone. She ignored the flight attendant. She ignored the gasps of the passengers. Her thumb moved with practiced, precise speed. She held the phone to her ear. It rang once. "Dad," Maya said, her voice clear, cold and carrying in the silent cabin. "It's happening again. Yes, on the plane. Trans-American Flight 415, Gate C22. The flight attendant's name is Barbara Albright." A new kind of panic, cold and immediate, entered Barbara's eyes. The rage was gone, replaced by a dawning, sickening realization. She had made a terrible mistake, but she had no idea how terrible. The cabin of Flight 415 had become a vacuum. All the air, all the sound had been sucked out and replaced by the single, clear, and perfectly enunciated voice of Maya Johnson. She was no longer a flustered teen. She was a star witness giving a deposition. "Yes, she's right here," Maya continued, her eyes locked on Barbara. "Her name is Barbara Albright. She just shouted at me, in front of the entire cabin, that people like me always think the rules don't apply. She then forcibly grabbed my prototype, and I heard it break." Barbara, who had built a 25-year career on the power of her own voice, found herself utterly silent. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The bright red of her rage had faded to a pale, clammy white. She looked like a fish that had just been slapped onto a dock. Dad, calm down," Maya said into the phone, her voice softening for a fraction of a second. "No, I'm fine. I'm not hurt. But Helios is. She really broke it." She turned her gaze back to Barbara, cold and analytical. She identified herself as the senior flight attendant. She refused to listen to me. She also yelled at another passenger, Mr. Henderson in 2D, who tried to intervene. "He's a witness." Mr. Henderson, a man in his late 50s with a kind, serious face, nodded slowly. "I am," he said, his voice loud enough for the phone to pick up. "I'm a partner at Sidley Austin. I saw the entire interaction. Her behavior was abhorrent." Barbara's head swiveled, as if looking for an ally. The other flight attendant, the young man, was standing frozen by the galley, his face ashen. In the aisle, just behind the business class curtain, a young woman in her early 20s, Chloe, had her phone up, not in a call, but in a way that was unmistakably recording. The little red light was on. "Barbara!" The voice of Captain Davies, crackling over the cabin intercom, was a thunderclap. "Report to the cockpit, immediately." The command broke Barbara's paralysis. She gave Maya one last look, a toxic cocktail of hatred, disbelief, and primal fear. And then, shoving past the boarding passengers still trickling in, she all but ran to the front of the plane, disappearing behind the cockpit door. The silence she left behind was heavy and awkward. Maya was still on the phone. "Okay, Dad. Yes, I'll ask. Hold on." She muted the call and looked up at the gate agent, Mark, who had just stepped back onto the plane, his face a mask of confusion. "Sir," Maya said, her voice polite again, "my father would like to know the full name of the captain of this flight." Mark blinked. I'm sorry. What is going on here?" We're trying to close the door." "The captain's name, please," Maya repeated, "and the name of the TAA station manager here at O'Hare. Your senior flight attendant, Ms. Albright, just assaulted me and destroyed my property." Assaulted. The word hung in the air, electric and dangerous. Before Mark could answer, the cockpit door opened. Barbara didn't come out. Instead, Captain Davies, a silver-haired man with a grim expression, emerged. He wasn't looking at the passengers. He was looking at his crew. "Mark," the captain said, his voice low and strained. "Stop boarding. Stop, everyone. Just stop." He walked down the aisle and stood in front of Maya. His eyes were professional, but they held a flicker of something. Annoyance, or deep, profound dread. "Miss," he began. "Johnson," Maya supplied. "Maya Johnson. Miss Johnson, I'm Captain Davies. I understand there was a disagreement with a member of my crew." "It wasn't a disagreement," Maya said, her voice steady. She took her thumb off the mute button. "Dad, you still there?" "I have Captain Davies with me." The captain's eyes widened. He had assumed she was talking to a father, a regular, angry dad. He had not assumed she was talking to that father. Maya held the phone out. "My father, Marcus Johnson, would like a word with you. He's legal counsel for, well, he'll tell you." Captain Davies looked at the phone as if it were a small, venomous snake. He was a pilot, a man of physics and procedure. This was something else. He took the phone. "This is Captain Davies," he said, his professional baritone wavering. The entire plane could hear the voice that came through the speaker. It was not a shout. It was a low, controlled, and deeply menacing baritone. It was the voice of a man who owned courtrooms. "Captain Davies," said the voice of Marcus Johnson. "This is Marcus Johnson, of Johnson, Reyes and Associates, and I am also calling you as a board member of the National Association for Civil Rights. You have a choice to make, right now. You are currently harboring a flight attendant who, in the last 5 minutes, has committed battery, destruction of private property worth over $50,000, and a string of verbal abuses rooted in racial bias against my 17-year-old daughter, all of which, by the way, I am told is on video." Chloe, the girl with the phone, flinched but didn't stop recording. Marcus Johnson's voice continued, a surgical strike. "So, Captain, here is the choice. You can either address this as a TAA internal matter, or we can address it as a federal crime. If you attempt to take off with that woman on your crew, if you move this aircraft 1 inch from the gate, I will personally be on the phone with the FAA and the Department of Transportation, and I will have your pilot's license and this entire aircraft grounded for review. Do you understand me?" Captain Davies was pale. "Mr. Johnson, I assure you, I was not aware." "You are aware now," Marcus snapped. "I have already filed a preliminary complaint with TAA Corporate Counsel, which is why your phone in that cockpit is about to ring. I have also forwarded this complaint to the DOT. You have 60 seconds to tell me that Ms. Albright is being removed from this flight, or I am escalating. Your 60 seconds starts now." The captain handed the phone back to Maya, his hand shaking. He didn't speak to her. He turned and looked at the gate agent. "Mark." "Mark," Captain Davies said, his voice a strained whisper. "Get Mr. Fields. Get the TAA station manager down here, now, and call operations. Tell them we have a security situation. A crew-related security situation. No one is going anywhere." He turned and looked at the passengers in business class, who had witnessed the entire drama. His customer service voice was gone. "Ladies and gentlemen," Captain Davies announced, his voice tight with a fury Maya couldn't quite place. "It appears we will have a procedural delay. I would advise you all to remain patient." He looked back at the cockpit, then at Maya, then at the damaged carry-on. He seemed to age 10 years. "God damn it, Barbara," he muttered under his breath, and stalked back to the cockpit, slamming the door behind him. The firestorm had been lit, and now the entire plane was about to be consumed by it. The atmosphere inside the 757 shifted from tense to surreal. The air recycling system hummed, a lonely sound in the cavern of a plane that was now a prison of awkwardness. Passengers in economy, sensing the deep structural wrongness of the situation, began to murmur. Maya Johnson sat in seat 1B, phone still in her hand. She was the unwilling epicenter. Mr. Henderson in 2D had his phone out, but he was typing, not recording. Maya guessed he was sending an email, likely a detailed statement, to her father. Chloe, the young woman from economy, had been politely but firmly asked by the other flight attendant, the young man, whose name tag read Alex, to return to her seat, which she had. But her phone, Maya was certain, was still active. Barbara Albright was, for the moment, a ghost. She was sealed in the cockpit with a captain who now, very clearly, despised her. The seconds ticked by. 1 minute. 2. Then things began to happen, all at once, in a cascade of corporate panic. The jet bridge thumped as it was redocked. The fasten seatbelt sign, which had been off, was switched on, then immediately off again, as if in confusion. A man in a sharp, ill-fitting suit, sweat beading on his high forehead, bounded onto the plane. He was Mr. Fields, the TAA O'Hare station manager. He bypassed Maya completely, his eyes fixed on the cockpit door. He rapped on it with an authority that was immediately undercut by the tremor in his hand. "Captain Davies, it's Jim Fields. Corporate is on my line. They're apoplectic." The cockpit door opened. Captain Davies stepped out, his face a thundercloud. "Jim, good. You're here to handle this. My crew is compromised." "Where is she?" Fields demanded. "In there," Davies grunted, nodding at the cockpit. "Refuses to come out. Says the girl set her up." Fields looked as if he might be sick. He turned his head and, for the first time, seemed to see Maya. He plastered on a smile that was a grotesque mask of terror. "Miss Johnson, I am so terribly sorry. James Fields, station manager. I want to assure you, Trans-American Airlines does not condone—" Maya just looked at him. She didn't need to say a word. Her silence was more powerful than any shout. She raised her phone slightly. "My father is still on the line, Mr. Fields," she said, her voice like ice. "He's on a conference call now, actually. He has a Ms. Janelle Washington from the Washington Post listening in. Would you like to say hello?" James Fields's smile didn't just fade. It collapsed. The blood drained from his face so fast he looked grey. Janelle Washington. He knew that name. Everyone in aviation knew that name. She was the Pulitzer-winning investigative journalist who had broken the story on the 737 MAX's faulty software. She was the dragon. "Oh, God," Fields whispered. He wasn't speaking to Maya. He was speaking to the universe. He fumbled for his own phone, which was already vibrating. He looked at the caller ID. "Talikal!" it screamed. He turned his back to Maya, a useless gesture of privacy. "David, yes, I'm here. I'm on the aircraft. Yes, I see her. I know who her father is. Why do you think I ran from Terminal 3? A journalist? Which journalist? Oh, Christ. No, the plane hasn't moved. The crew? What about the crew?" Fields listened, his face going from grey to ashen. He scrubbed his free hand over his thinning hair. "The entire crew? You can't be serious. We don't have... That will take hours. This flight will be cancelled. Yes, I understand. Operational necessity. I will. He hung up. He looked defeated. He looked like a man who had just been ordered to scuttle his own ship. He turned to the cabin. He looked at Captain Davies. "Captain," Field said, his voice trembling with forced authority. "By order of TAA Executive Council, your entire flight crew, yourself included, is being removed from service, pending a full investigation. This aircraft is grounded. We are deplaning." Captain Davies, for his part, just nodded grimly. It was the call he expected. And Barbara? Fields's eyes were cold. Barbara, too. But she's not to be removed from service. She is to be suspended indefinitely, and she is to be escorted from the premises by airport security. Not TAA security, airport security. The distinction was critical. This was no longer an HR matter. It was criminal. "Ladies and gentlemen," Fields said, stepping into the aisle, his voice booming with false confidence. "This is Station Manager Fields. On behalf of Trans-American Airlines, I must apologize. Due to an unforeseen crew-related issue, this flight, TAA 415, is now cancelled." A collective, outraged groan erupted from the entire aircraft. This was no longer just a front cabin drama. This was 180 people whose plans, connections, and lives had just been detonated. "Cancelled!" a man yelled from the back. "What the hell does crew-related issue mean? We're all on the plane." "We will be deplaning immediately," Fields continued, shouting over the rising anger. Please, collect your belongings. TAA agents at Gate C-22 will have rebooking information and vouchers for hotels and meals. We apologize." The cockpit door opened. Barbara Albright emerged, but she was not the same woman. Her makeup was streaked. Her tight bun had come partially undone, wisps of blonde hair framing a face of pure, distilled venom. She saw Fields. She saw the deplaning passengers. She saw Maya, who was still on the phone. "You!" Barbara spat, pointing a shaking finger at Maya. "You did this! You little bitch! You ruined me!" She lunged. It was not a maybe. It was a full-bodied, nails-out lunge. But she never made it. Mr. Henderson, the lawyer from 2D, had been anticipating it. He was a big man, and his foot shot out into the aisle. Barbara, blinded by rage, tripped over it, sprawling into the aisle in a humiliating heap of navy blue uniform and broken pride. "Don't you dare touch her!" Henderson roared, standing to his full height. "Mr. Fields, airport police, now!" 2 O'Hare police officers, who had clearly been summoned by Fields and were waiting in the jet bridge, stormed onto the plane. "That's her," Fields said, pointing, his voice shaking. "Barbara Albright. She's the one." "Ma'am, you need to come with us," one of the officers said, grabbing her arm. "Get your hands off me," Barbara shrieked, flailing. "I am a 25-year veteran. I am the senior crew. This is my plane." "Not anymore, it's not," the officer said grimly. He and his partner hauled the struggling, swearing, crying flight attendant to her feet. "You'll all pay for this," she screamed as they dragged her into the jet bridge. "You hear me? You don't know who you're messing with. I have a union." Her voice faded, replaced by the angry, confused roar of 180 deplaning passengers. Maya finally clicked, "End call." She looked at her phone, at the text that had just come through from her father. "Are you safe?" She typed back. "Yes." "She's gone. They're deplaning the whole plane. They cancelled the flight." A new message came back, almost instantly. "Good. That's step 1. Janelle is already writing. The video Chloe sent is uploading to the posts server. Don't talk to anyone from TAA. A new agent, a woman named Sarah from my corporate contact, is coming to get you. She will take you to the flagship lounge. I am on the next flight to O'Hare. I will be there in 3 hours. And Maya? Yes, Dad? I am so proud of you. Maya closed her eyes. She felt the knot in her stomach, which she hadn't even realized was there, finally begin to unwind. The plane was grounded. The world had stopped. And in the chaos, she finally felt safe. The terminal at Gate C-22 was a scene from a disaster movie. It was a churning sea of human frustration. Passengers from Flight 415, suddenly ejected from their travel plans, swarmed the 2 overwhelmed gate agents who were desperately trying to rebook 180 people onto flights that were already full. The word "cancelled" was being shouted in a dozen different accents, each one laced with a unique flavor of fury. What do you mean? The next flight to LAX isn't until tomorrow morning. My sister is getting married. A $15 food voucher? Are you kidding me? This is Chicago. Through this vortex of chaos, Maya Johnson walked, pulling her backpack and the carry-on case that held the broken remains of Helios. She felt 1,000 eyes on her. She was the girl, the cause, the epicenter. Whispers followed her. Shouted at the flight attendant. No, the flight attendant shouted at her. Saw the whole thing. The attendant pushed her. Something about her dad being a lawyer. They cancelled the whole flight. Can you believe it? Maya kept her head down, her hoodie pulled up, her face an impassive mask. She just needed to get to the lounge, as her dad had instructed. As she cleared the jet bridge, Mr. Henderson, the lawyer from 2D, caught up to her. He had a kind, tired-looking wife by his side. "Miss Johnson," he said, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. Maya flinched, and he immediately retracted it. "Sorry. I just wanted to say, you handled that with a grace I've rarely seen, even in a courtroom. I've already emailed my full, unprompted statement to your father's office. If you need anything, a witness, a reference, anything, here is my personal card." "Thank you, Mr. Henderson," Maya said, her voice quiet. I appreciate you stepping in." "Nonsense," he scoffed. "What I did was nothing. What you did, that was something." He smiled. "Now get out of this zoo. My wife and I are going to go battle for a hotel room." Maya was about to move on when another person approached her, this one much more hesitant. It was Chloe, the young woman who had filmed the incident. She was biting her lip, her phone clutched in her hand like a talisman. "Hey," Chloe said, her voice barely a whisper. That was insane. Are you okay?" "I am now," Maya said. Did you really send that to my dad and the Washington Post?" "Yeah," Chloe said, a small, nervous smile playing on her lips. "Your dad's paralegal called me. They verified my identity in, 30 seconds. It was kind of scary. They're sending me a legal form, but they said Miss Washington was already actioning the file. I also... You what?" I may have also posted a small clip of it," Chloe said, wincing. "Just the part where she yells, 'People like you,' and then shoves the bag. I put it on TikTok and Twitter. I tagged Trans-American. I'm sorry, was that bad?" Maya looked at Chloe. She saw the Black Lives Matter pin on her backpack. She saw the vote sticker on her phone case. She wasn't just a bystander. She was an ally. Maya broke into a small, genuine smile. "No, Chloe, I have a feeling that was not bad at all." "Good," Chloe breathed, relieved. "Because it's already got 50,000 views. The TAA account is getting destroyed." A woman in a crisp new TAA uniform, this one with a customer care lead badge, hurried toward them, her face a mask of polite panic. "Miss Maya Johnson," Yes? My name is Sarah. I'm here to personally escort you. We have a private room for you in the flagship lounge. We've also secured you a seat on our 8 p.m. direct flight to LAX. On American, our partner airline, of course. She was talking a mile a minute. And we've already dispatched a courier to retrieve your checked luggage. Anything you need. Anything. A meal, a new bag. We are so sorry for the experience. Maya nodded. This was the woman her father had mentioned. Okay, Sarah. Thank you. Lead the way. As Sarah escorted Maya away from the gate and toward the sanctuary of the lounge, Maya glanced back. The gate area was a pit of angry, stranded people. She saw Captain Davies and his co-pilot being debriefed, their faces grim, by another executive. She saw the 2 other flight attendants, including the young man Alex, sitting on a bench, looking shell-shocked. They were witnesses. They were collateral damage. The plane itself, TAA 415, sat empty and dark at the gate, a beached whale. It was grounded, cancelled, a multi-million-dollar piece of equipment rendered inert by a single hateful shout. Meanwhile, 30,000 feet over Pennsylvania, Barbara Albright's day was just beginning its downward spiral. She had been processed by O'Hare Security, charged with simple battery, a charge Mr. Henderson had called in a favor to expedite, and released on her own recognizance. She was now in the back of a cab, her union rep screaming in her ear through her phone. People like you? Barbara! What in God's name were you thinking? People like who? Barbara. Who did you think she was? She was a non-compliant passenger, Barbara sobbed into the phone. She was wearing a hoodie. She wouldn't listen to me. She refused to check her bag. It was junk. It wasn't junk, you fool. The union rep, a man named Don, roared. It was a $50,000 piece of scientific equipment. You didn't just yell at some kid. You assaulted the daughter of Marcus fucking Johnson, the civil rights lawyer, the guy who sued the city of Chicago and won. And not only that, you did it in front of a Washington Post journalist's niece. No. Wait. Oh God, it's worse. The call was to the journalist. Live, while it was happening. Barbara's sobs hitched. What does that mean? It means, Don said, his voice flat, that this isn't a suspension we can fight. This isn't a retraining situation. The video is already on every news channel. The TikTok has, let me check, 1.5 million views. It's the #1 trending topic on Twitter. Barbara Albright, ta disgrace, flying while black. No. TAA has already invoked the morality clause in your contract. They're terminating you, for cause, effective immediately. You're losing your pension, Barbara, your flight benefits, everything. They're going to try and make an example of you to stop the bleeding. But the union, Barbara whispered, the cab rattling over a pothole. The union can't help you, Don said, his voice cold. You are toxic. You're a nuclear-level PR disaster. You. He sighed, a sound of utter exhaustion. Barbara, you didn't just get grounded. You flew your entire career, your entire life, straight into the side of a mountain. The call clicked off. Barbara was left alone in the back of a cab, the smell of cheap air freshener mixing with the sour stench of her own despair. She was no longer Barbara Albright, senior flight attendant. She was just Barbara. A hashtag. A meme. A villain in a story that was, by the second, rocketing around the world. The TAA flagship lounge was an oasis of muted greys, brushed steel, and the quiet clink of expensive glassware. It was a world away from the bedlam at gate C-22. Sarah, the customer care lead, had installed Maya in a private reservation room, a small glass-walled office with a desk, a phone, and a stunning view of the tarmac. A waiter had appeared with a bottle of sparkling water and a menu from which Maya had absently ordered a club sandwich. Her phone was a wildfire. Texts from friends. "OMG, Maya, is this you?" with a link to the TikTok. Texts from her coding group. "Did that witch really break Helios? We'll kill her." She was on the phone with her dad, who was now at Dulles in the Admiral's Club, waiting for his own flight to Chicago. "The airline's CEO just called me," Marcus said. His voice was no longer the angry father baritone. It was the cold, calculating strategist's voice. James B. McCory. Sounded like he'd been gargling gravel. He offered, and I quote, "his deepest, most profound apologies, and a significant six-figure settlement to make this go away. He offered to buy you a new prototype. He offered a full scholarship fund in your name." What did you say?" Maya asked, nibbling on a French fry. Marcus chuckled, a low, dangerous sound. "I told him I wasn't for sale, and neither were you. I told him this wasn't a negotiation. This was a public reckoning. I told him that 6 figures was an insult. The damage to your reputation, to the idea of a young black woman being in business class, was a multi-million-dollar problem. I told him that the only reason I was still on the phone with him was that Ms. Janelle Washington was busy writing the first draft of an article that was going to evaporate 10% of his stock value by morning." "Dad, he's panicking, Maya. They're not panicking because of what Barbara did. They're panicking because they got caught. Because of the video. Because of who you are. This is the only language they understand." He was right. And this was the twist that Barbara and TAA had never seen coming. The call hadn't just been to a lawyer, it had been to a crusader. The real unraveling, however, wasn't happening in the lounge. It was happening in TAA's corporate headquarters in Fort Worth, Texas. An emergency board meeting was in progress, and it wasn't just about Barbara. The problem, a stern woman from legal was saying, her face projected on a massive screen, is that the Johnson, Reyes and Associates firm has already filed a DOT complaint, and it's not just about Ms. Albright. "What do you mean?" CEO McCory snapped. "This was a rogue employee, a single bad apple." "Was it, James?" the legal counsel said. "Because in the last 90 minutes, Marcus Johnson's firm, in conjunction with the Post, has uncovered 11 prior formal complaints against Barbara Albright in the last 3 years. All of them were filed by non-white passengers. 4 black, 5 Hispanic, 2 Middle Eastern, all of them alleged verbal abuse, discriminatory language, and aggressive behavior." The room went silent. "And all of them," the lawyer continued, "were resolved and dismissed by the same manager. O'Hare Station Manager, James Fields." McCory looked as if he'd been punched. "Fields, the one on the ground right now. The very same. It appears Mr. Fields has been protecting Ms. Albright, who I am told is a senior union rep in the Chicago base, for years. He's been burying her. He's been enabling her. This isn't a bad apple, James. This is a rotten orchard. And Marcus Johnson just drove a bulldozer through it." The twist. It wasn't just Barbara's rage. It was the system that had nurtured it. The system that had told her, again and again, that her behavior was acceptable. That people like Maya were problems to be managed, not customers to be served. Back at O'Hare, Mr. Fields was experiencing this twist in real time. He was in his own office, having just resolved the 180 passenger complaints, i.e., thrown vouchers at them until they went away, when his own boss, the VP of North American Operations, called. "Jim," the VP said. No greeting, no preamble. "Start packing your desk." "What? What are you—" "I handled it. The girl is in the lounge. The passengers are rebooked." "You handled it?" the VP spat. "You've been handling Barbara Albright for 3 years, you goddamn fool. You're the reason we're in this mess. Legal is looking at your complaint file. You buried her. You cost this company. $100 million in market cap in 2 hours. But the union just cut her loose, and we're cutting you loose. You're a liability, Jim. Your management, your complicity, is the entire story. Janelle Washington is running an article tonight with your name in the headline. The manager who enabled the rage. Security is on their way to escort you out. You're done." The call ended. Jim Fields looked at his TAA Excellence in Management plaque on the wall. He looked at the phone. He had just become the second and much larger piece of karma. He too was grounded, permanently. This was the true grounding. It wasn't the plane. The plane was just metal. It was the system. It was the careers. It was the comfortable, insulated and prejudiced world that Barbara Albright and Jim Fields had built for themselves. And with one call, a 17-year-old girl in a hoodie had just burned it to the ground. By the time Maya Johnson was boarding her new non-TAA flight to Los Angeles, where she was met at the gate by an American Airlines executive, personally, and escorted to a front-row seat, the story was no longer a story. It was a global event. Chloe's 45-second TikTok clip had rocketed past 10 million views. It was the sound. The audio of "People Like You" was already being remixed, duetted, and stitched by creators demanding justice. But the real bomb was the Washington Post article. Janelle Washington had not slept. She had not rested. She had written. The headline was a masterpiece of journalistic savagery. "This is my aircraft, inside the toxic culture at Trans-American that led to the grounding of Flight 415. The article was a 5,000-word dissection. It had everything. It had the video. It had the timeline. It had Mr. Henderson's on-the-record, scathing witness statement. I have seen better-behaved individuals in a prison lockdown. It had the names: Barbara Albright, James Fields, and most damningly, it had the receipts. It detailed all 11 of the prior complaints, complete with quotes from the passengers who had been dismissed and ignored. It painted a picture not of a single incident, but of a pattern of systemic, protected racism. The fallout was instantaneous. TAA's stock, ticker TRAM, opened the next morning down 12%, a loss of, as Marcus Johnson had predicted, nearly $1 billion in market value. Boycott TAA was the #1 trend worldwide for 48 hours. Competitor airlines, in a brilliant move of opportunistic marketing, began offering status matches to TAA's elite-level flyers, with social media managers pointedly tweeting, "We welcome everyone aboard." TAA's headquarters was a war room. CEO James B. McCorry, his face grey, was on an all-hands call with his PR and legal teams. "This is a 5-alarm fire," he was yelling. "This is an extinction-level event. What do we do?" "We capitulate," his legal counsel said, her voice flat. "We capitulate publicly and completely. We don't fight this. We don't dispute it. We embrace the reckoning. It's the only way." And so, the karma began to fall like acid rain. The first act, James B. McCorry, CEO of Trans-American Airlines, went on live, national television. Not a press release. A live interview with a prime-time anchor. He did not equivocate. He looked into the camera, his eyes hollow. "I am here tonight to offer my deepest, Most unreserved apology to Ms. Maya Johnson, he began. What she endured was not a disagreement. It was a failure of our company, a failure of our culture, and a failure of our humanity. It was frankly disgusting, and I am responsible for it, he went on. He announced that Barbara Albright had been terminated, and the airline was actively assisting the FAA in having her flight certification permanently revoked. He announced that James Fields, the O'Hare manager, had also been terminated for gross negligence and failure to uphold our company's values. But he didn't stop there. This was the hard karma. This incident has exposed a deep sickness in our organization, McCory said, his voice straining. And a simple apology is not enough. Effective today, Trans-American is partnering with the firm of Johnson, Reyes and Associates. Yes, Mr. Johnson's firm, to conduct a top-to-bottom, independent audit of our hiring, training, and complaint resolution processes. This was a masterstroke. He had turned his greatest adversary into his partner. He was paying Marcus Johnson, handsomely, to fix the company that had wronged his daughter. Furthermore, McCory continued, we are establishing a $5 million STEM scholarship fund, the Helios Grant, for minority women in science and technology. The first recipient of this grant will be Ms. Maya Johnson, should she choose to accept it. The news cycle, which had been feasting on TAA's corpse, suddenly paused. This was not the standard corporate doublespeak. This was a full, unconditional, public surrender. The fallout for Barbara Albright was more personal and far more devastating. She was a pariah. Her friends in the union, the ones she had protected and who had protected her, no longer answered her calls. She was radioactive. The New York Post ran a picture of her, doorstepped outside her modest Chicago condo, her face a mask of rage and cheap sunglasses. The headline, "The Hateful Hostess." She was charged. The video was undeniable. She pleaded no contest to misdemeanor battery and destruction of property. She was sentenced to 200 hours of community service at a cultural diversity center in a final twist of irony, and ordered to pay restitution for the prototype. Her career was over. Her name was now synonymous with Karen, but on a professional, national scale. She was, as Don the union rep had predicted, grounded for life. She was last seen, months later, working a cash register at a suburban outlet mall, her blonde bun gone, her face pale and anonymous, her voice, once a tool of power, reduced to a timid, "Will that be cash or credit?" A single incident can be a tragedy. A pattern is a reckoning. For Trans-American Airlines, the TAA 415 incident became a line in the sand. They had no choice but to change. Under the ruthless, exacting supervision of Marcus Johnson's law firm, they tore their employee handbooks down to the studs. De-escalation and implicit bias training were no longer sleepy, online modules. They were full-day, immersive, and mandatory seminars, and the primary case study, the one they watched in horrified silence, was the high-resolution cabin footage of Barbara Albright's meltdown, intercut with Chloe's viral TikTok. The Barbara Albright training module became a verb in the industry, a synonym for a career-ending failure of character. Captain Davies and the other flight attendant, Alex, were cleared. Their testimony against Barbara was a key part of the investigation. Alex, in fact, was promoted to purser and was featured in TAA's new Welcome Aboard, Welcome All ad campaign. The TAA stock, after a brutal 6-month dip, began to climb back. They had taken the hit. They had survived. They were, by all accounts, a better, safer, and more inclusive airline for it. But this story was never about the airline. It was about Maya. She had missed the Caltech Innovators Summit. Helios, her 800-hour prototype, was a pile of fractured acrylic and waterlogged circuits. But the story had a life of its own. A week after the incident, she received a call. It was from the CEO of Intel. "Maya," the woman said, "I read Janelle Washington's article. I saw what happened. Your prototype. That was for the Caltech summit, wasn't it?" "Yes, ma'am," Maya said. "Well, forget that. I'm the keynote sponsor for the main Intel Developer Forum in San Francisco next month. It's usually for PhDs and tech leaders. I'm bumping one of them. The 10 a.m. slot is yours. You're not going to be a contestant. You're going to be a speaker. Tell them your story. Tell them about Helios." Maya's speech was a sensation. She didn't talk about Barbara. She didn't talk about racism, not directly. She stood on a stage in front of 5,000 of the world's top engineers, wearing her Stanford hoodie. She just talked about her project. She talked about the global water crisis. She talked about her design for Helios. And then, at the end, she said, "My first prototype was recently lost in a structural failure. But the idea remains, the idea that we can pull water from the air for the people who need it most. The idea that no matter what someone tells you, no matter how loudly they shout that it won't fit or it doesn't belong, you have to know that it does. You have to know that you do." She received a 5-minute standing ovation. She was approached after the speech by a venture capitalist. 2 months later, Helios H2O was a fully funded startup. Stanford, her dream school, had already sent her a congratulations on her early admission. The hard karma had hit. It had grounded Barbara Albright, it had humbled an airline, and it had exposed a rotten system. But for Maya Johnson, it was the opposite. It was a launch pad. The final scene of this story takes place 6 months later. Maya Johnson is in seat 1B of a Trans-American Airlines flight to Tokyo, where she is opening her company's first international office. A flight attendant, new and professional, leans down. "Ms. Johnson," she says quietly, "I'm the purser on this flight. I just wanted to say, on behalf of the entire crew, it is a genuine honor to have you on board." Maya looks up from her laptop, which is running a new simulation for Helios 2.0. She looks at the attendant, a young, bright-eyed woman of color, and she gives her the smile that she couldn't give Barbara, a smile of warmth, of gratitude, and of a power that had been tested and proven. "Thank you," Maya said. "It's good to be here. They say you shouldn't fight on an airplane, but sometimes you have to." Maya's story isn't just about a racist flight attendant getting fired. It's about the difference between policy and justice. It's about how one person, armed with the truth, the right support, and a video camera, can take on $1 billion corporation and win. Barbara Albright thought she was the authority, but she forgot that the real power is with the people. This story shows that karma isn't always instant, but when it lands, it can be devastating. What Barbara did was an abuse of power. What Maya and her father did was a check on that power. If this story resonated with you, and you believe that we all have a right to travel with dignity and respect, then like this video and share it. And make sure you subscribe to the channel for more true stories of justice and karma. Let us know in the comments. What would you have done in Maya's situation?